So we actually, I just took the panel slide off to show your presentation. Maybe, does it work for the flow for Kristen just to kick off? Or do you want
I think a little bit of an intro for her, just so we have background.
Go for it.
Front loaded me, so I gotta start talking.
I'm a New Yorker, so I can speak fast. Okay, our next segment has all the elements to dream the impossible dream, to make it happen, to evolve from newcomer to a real leader in our community in a very short amount of time, but in a steady pace. It is my honor to introduce Kristen Coury. She is the CEO and artistic director of the Gulf Shore Playhouse. Her career began in London with the English Shakespeare Company, and it flourished on Broadway, where she contributed to renowned productions such as Disney's Beauty and the Beast and Andrew Lloyd Webber's Sunset Boulevard. It is under her dynamic leadership that the Playhouse was born, a $72 million project, and the product of which has been, several of us had the privilege of touring yesterday, and if you do have time before you leave, it's an amazing accomplishment. Just to connect some dots here, Kristen is on, she was newly appointed recently to the Florida Council on Arts and Culture by Senator Pasadena. Also joining her is Michael Wynn. Michael is a fourth generation Neapolitan. He's a boy who grew up in Naples, working at the hardware store and the family market, rising now to be a distinguished business leader in our community, serving as chairman of the Wynn family of companies. He's also a leader in the economy, including a tour of duty with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta as chair of the Miami branch board of directors. Please join me in welcoming both of them, and I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Hello. I hear Kara talking about the arts, and I feel everybody's eyes glazing over. So I'm going to try to keep this. Am I going to do it? You'll do it?
Yeah, you can.
All right. So I like to start with.
We both can do it.
Oh, we'll do it. Okay, great. Gulf Shore Playhouse. How many of you looked up as you were driving south on Goodland Frank Road, just over there, and saw the actual new playhouse? Anybody? Anybody look up? Anybody look? Oh, you guys are all insiders. You don't know. Right over there is a big, giant spaceship of a theater called Gulf Shore Playhouse, $72 million capital campaign. And I'd like to start with this slide, Founder, Entrepreneur, Manifesto, because this might actually be of interest to all of you. Many of you do not think of CEO of a not-for-profit being any kind of entrepreneur. However, I would refute that theory. I moved to Naples strictly by accident 21 years ago, coming from New York City, as Kara said, working on Broadway shows. And realized very quickly that there was a niche to fill in the local scene. There was a beloved community theater, which uses volunteers and people who are not really actors by trade to be in their shows. And there was also a venerated performing arts center, which is what we call presenters, somebody who sort of opens their doors and let a show come in. So for example, if you've seen Hamilton on Broadway, they'll put Hamilton on tour, they'll open the doors, and Hamilton will slide in for a week and slide out for a week. It'll be exactly the same production that you saw on Broadway, different actors of course, but same setting, same choreography, same whatever. What there was a niche to fill for was a self-producing professional regional theater. Those of you who come from different parts of the country, if you come from Milwaukee, there's Milwaukee Repertory Theater. If you come from Minneapolis, there's the Guthrie Theater. If you come from Chicago, there's the Goodman Theater. So these are the big theaters of our country. And there have not historically been a lot of large regional theaters in Florida. Pretty much south of Atlanta, it's been the theater wasteland. So I decided I was going to start a theater company, and a professional theater company, and keep in mind there are no professional actors in this town, there's no professional artisans in this town, there's no professional directors or designers in this town. So everything we do, we needed to bring in. So I went home to New York and I said to a lawyer, a friend of mine, who was also a Broadway producer, look, I don't know anybody in this town, I don't really have any money, and I don't even have a name for the place, but is it too soon to start? I would like to start a professional theater. And he said, no, it's gonna take you a year to get your 501c3, your dispensation for the not-for-profit. Because that's the model. Regional theaters in America work on a not-for-profit model. Half of our budget is usually covered by philanthropy, and half of our budget is usually covered by made revenue, either through ticket sales or concessions and things like that. So he said, yeah, start your 501c3 and hit the ground running. So I moved right across the street to Bayfront and in those colorful buildings over there, and I did hit the ground running. Within 3 months, I was trying to produce, sort of one-night shows. We didn't really have a place to produce. We eventually moved into a municipal building that had no business really ever being a theater. It was meant to be more like an assembly hall. But I was going to use it like a theater because I was an industrious New Yorker. So you can turn anything into a theater. And so, but for many years, working from my Bayfront apartment, and it was a company of one, me, myself, and I would stand on the balcony when I got bored and close my eyes and imagine a theater growing up right out of the land, right across the street. And when I had to apply for my 501c3 to the government, I had to fill out a short-term goals and a long-term goals. My short-term goal was put on a play somewhere. And my long-term goal was to build a state-of-the-art professional regional theater and education center with 2 theater spaces, an education wing, and all the rehearsal rooms and classrooms to make it replete. And I would like to say that November 1st of 2024, we opened that dream, and the dream came true. So just in fact, right across the street, thank you very much. Right across the street from that place where I dreamed of a theater coming up across the street, it opened, and in fact, it has 2 theater spaces, an education wing, and all the rehearsal rooms and classrooms that make it replete. So if you keep your eye on the goal, you can actually be an entrepreneur of a not-for-profit. So to tell you a little bit, what Kathleen did not say is that Governor DeSantis last year vetoed every single art funding in the state. I was excited because, thanks to Kathleen, we got a special appropriation of $2.5 million to help us finish out our capital campaign, but most arts funding, all the general program support that the state of Florida does, was cut. Everything. 0. Veto. What message that sends to the state of Florida and everybody else is that Governor DeSantis at least views the arts as having no value whatsoever. But I want to talk to you a little bit about impact. So yes, we started with 1 staff member, but we, as late as 2023, we had 60 staff members and an $8 million budget, and as we moved into this new home, we now have, well, I'm losing track really, it says 80, but I think it's close to 90 by now, and a $12 million budget. So our average annual growth rate is about 23%. We did that every year in the black, with no long-term debt until we finally had to get a bridge loan, of course, because we have pledges that spread out over 5 years, and people are still paying their capital campaign pledges, but that was the first time we ever had any long-term debt. So for the first 16 years, we were in the Norris Center in that little municipal space I was telling you about. We were renting there. We were renting little rooms that we could find to rehearse in. We had a little tiny production shop where we build all of our sets, our costumes, our props, everything we do is made. People say to me, where's that troupe going next? It's a great show. And I say, it's going into recycling, and we'll be already building the new set and bringing in, it costs us about $750,000 to support this model. Just alone, part of our budget is bringing in all these actors, these directors, these designers, putting them in housing, giving them cars, traveling them in on a flight, usually because we're bringing them from New York or Chicago or DC, so it costs a lot of money. But now, we've got our New Maker Theater and Education Center. $72 million of raised money from individuals, except for that $2.5 million from the state. Every other dollar was raised by individuals who live here and care about our community. And we also partnered with, you're going to hear from Barron Collier Companies tomorrow. We partnered with Barron Collier. They did a build to suit for us on a 25,000 square foot shop, which we will rent for 20 years. And we are going to, so we'll build all of our sets, our costumes, our lighting, our props, and work on our sound over in that place. We've worked with the city of Naples. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. We bought 3 acres right there. Ideally, what the plan was we were going to build the theater on 2 acres, and the 3rd acre would become a parking lot. And I had a great owner's rep at the time, who was not a great owner's rep, but he was a great former city manager. And he said, here's what you need to do. Take that 3rd acre. Before you do that, go to the Wynn family next door and see if they want to do a land swap with you. Because we had a strip of parking that went from the street to, back behind the street. And they had a strip of land, about 1 acre as well, that went from the street to behind the street, right next to ours. He said, promise them the acre that goes all along the street. So they'll have frontage, and then see if, you'll take this acre that's behind, go to the city, and tell the city you want to donate an acre of land to them to build a parking garage on, a public parking garage. So I said, okay. And our people got in touch with Jeff Wynn, who's Michael's cousin, and we said, we're interested in doing a land swap with you. They had a catering building that was like a bunker built in the 50s or 60s or 70s, I'm not sure. And they said, well, yes, we're interested in knocking down that catering business, and closing the catering business and knocking down the building. And yes, we'd love to swap land with you, and we'll build a beautiful mixed-use building of some kind. And we were like, great. So step one, accomplished. Step two, went to the city, offered them this acre of land to build a parking garage on. And they said, now, why would we want to do that? And I said, well, considering there's no free land in Naples and we're offering you a free acre of land, maybe that's why. But also, let me tell you what's going on here. So when I was living in Bayfront, this whole district, this hotel wasn't here, the theater wasn't there, there was nothing but storage units and mechanics and tire warehouses. And so they couldn't see and they didn't understand, and it's a real shame. Remember this. Whoever you vote for, even on your city council or your county commission, it's very, very important because it will rule your business and your ability to do business healthily and well. They couldn't see, they couldn't understand, no matter how many times I told them, look at this city, look at that city, look at that city, look what happens when you put a theater down here. Businesses naturally are magnets to theaters. Why? Theaters are generators of growth. They're generators of impact. Just because you go to shop at that CVS does not mean you're going to stop in at the olive oil store next door and buy some olive oil. But because you go to see a play or a musical at a theater, what do? You go eat, you maybe valet park, you maybe drive into someplace else. Arts tourists actually spend more and stay longer, right? So you might come in and stay in a hotel. And there's lots of, you might go for a stroll and buy a pair of shoes. There's lots of impact that is created by a theater that is auxiliary income. And so we believe that actually our $12 million budget, which is spent largely in this town, is also responsible for an additional $10 to $12 million. The official number that has been coming out of the state arts surveys is about $35, maybe $40 in Naples, I think. There's no way in Naples that a person is going out to a theater production and only spending $40 extra. You can barely get an entree for $40 anymore in this town. So my belief is that it's actually closer to $75 or $100 per person who goes to a play. So we're basing it on our numbers, but fair enough, we think it's about another $10 million worth of impact that we're putting into this area. And you can see the difference. This used to be an empty tract of land, and now there's condos, and there's a hotel, and there's our building, and there's going to be the Wynn building. And that's what the theater looks like, in case you didn't look up as you were coming by. So take a look at it when you go out. And this was our first production out of the gate, Anything Goes. Every single one of these people came from New York, and it was very much a Broadway show. We also have a great education arm. We're teaching our kids the usual theater conservatory stuff, how to act and sing and dance, but we're also going into our schools and we're actually teaching to state standards using theater as a tool. We're partnering with other organizations like the Holocaust Museum. We're doing two plays about local survivors, and we go into the classroom and we use them as tools because the survivors themselves used to go into the classroom and they're aging out, they're getting too old to do that. We actually also have adult programming. So there's a lot of things we do with education. This is our season coming up. For those of you who are Neapolitans, Lehman Trilogy opens tomorrow, about not just the fall of the Lehman Brothers, but the actual whole history of the Lehman Brothers. It was an Olivier Award winner, a Tony Award winner, and 3 of the best actors I've seen on the stage.
How long will that be running?
It will run to the end of February, so come on along. We do not have many tickets left. They're almost entirely sold out. We also have Dial M for Murder running right now, and a wonderful comedy, Noise is Off, running. So I talked to you about economic impact, but I want to also just make a quick pitch for the arts. The arts are 4.4% of our nation's GDP. Over $1 trillion is generated by arts-related businesses. It's not just theater. This is visual art. This is graphic art. This is any kind of art that's happening throughout our country. And also we have an export surplus. We actually export many more arts than we actually import. So, you know, if you think about, I worked on Beauty and the Beast. We sent that show to Japan and Australia and London and Vienna and many more places and things. And, you know, if you think about Lion King or Wicked, Wicked has made more money for Warner Brothers than even all the Harry Potter movies put together. And that was just the theater production. The movie has now become the biggest movie musical ever known to man. And so we're continuing to grow that. And that's Gulf Shore Playhouse. And then I wanted to talk about intertwining marriage, business, and philanthropy, because the thing that many of you don't know, as I mentioned, we partnered with the Wynn family. We talked to Jeff Wynn. I hadn't met Michael Wynn, and the first time that I did meet Michael was when I invited him into our office to give him a pitch, to tell him about this project we were planning to do, to ask if his family might be interested in supporting us philanthropically. Last July, we got married. And so now we're going to talk about the intertwining of business and marriage and philanthropy. So, Michael Wynn, you want to come to the stage?
I'll give you this. Maybe you another.
You're like Sonny and Sherry, both need a mic.
Just so you know, you see what dynamo that Kristen is. We did end up writing a check, so she did get money out of us. Really, it was kind of us working together in the community on that parking garage that took some time to get through City Council and approve through COVID. That really kind of allowed the relationship to blossom. And I won't ask for a raise of hands, but my guess is that at least a handful of you in this room have been through a divorce, or at least you've experienced with your families and all the impacts that have on family offices and family businesses. What was the case for me in my first marriage, which may have some similarities, is that as the businesses grew, there was a greater demand in terms of kind of public input, public volunteerism, leadership, etc. And there became kind of this divided life. I had my world, and then my ex-wife had her world. And I never really understood or knew the benefit of what an integrated life could look like in terms of personal and business life. And I will say, Kathleen Pasadoma talked earlier about 2 and 2 equals 22, and a lot of the things that she did. Well, I can say that for our lives now, the integration of our personal and business lives has also had a significant multiplier in terms of our ability to be able to do good, not just with our respective organizations, but both at the regional, local, and now state level. And so I don't know if you want to comment on some of those things, or I can kind of jump into some of those ways where our lives have overlapped.
Well, I was going to say first too that so the first time I met Michael was to invite him in to do a pitch, but the way we started really working together was that this parking garage project took 4 years. And at some point it was going south. They didn't want the free land. They did an entire study across the entire city and found out there was no free land anywhere else, or even land they wanted to buy. And still they were sort of like, oh, we don't know. And so one of the city councilmen came to me in the middle of COVID and said, you're going to need to create a coalition to convince these city council people to take this offer and to build this parking garage. I said, I'm going to have to create a coalition. I'm giving you free land. You should be building the coalition. And they said, no, you're going to have to do it. So I called Michael Wynn, who I barely knew, and I said, they want me to create a coalition. Will you be the chair? And he said, who's on the coalition? I said, nobody. But if you come on board, there'll be a lot of people who will jump on board, a lot of business people. And he did, and that was what happened. So we actually ended up just being on Zoom meetings. It was the deep, dark days of the pandemic. We were on Zoom meetings once a week. And love blossomed.
No, absolutely. So, this dynamic, a woman would come on the screen talking about fighting city council, and we would go through these different experiences together, and slowly but surely we got the garage over the finish line. But you name it, because of different budget constraints, hurricane impacts, etc., and kind of an anti-growth mentality, for Coury, or for the city of Naples. There were many different points along the way where that project was in peril, and now, as you see, it's almost complete and is serving as a huge catalyst to development because of Gulf Shore Playhouse.
But our lives do overlap in so many ways. I was appointed to the Naples Chamber Board in 2020. Michael had been the board chair for, board leadership for about 9 years, and that was, without us knowing each other really at that point. I had gotten appointed, so now we serve on the board of the chamber together, and that's just one way. I'm a graduate of Leadership Collier and Leadership Florida, and so is Michael. Michael actually is going to be the chair this year. So we overlap in so many ways. People will say, the fact that we were invited to this today, the fact we have to go to the Leadership Florida conference together, or whatever it is.
No, absolutely. And I also happen to be chair of Florida Gulf Coast University, so grateful to Kathleen for the significant dollars she's helped with our water school. But we also have a theater school. And so Kristen is now helping them with a major building project, as well as educating them about what the real workforce needs are for the arts in terms of future workforce, and being able to bring Broadway producers to be able to expose the students, to those elements. And then I've been fortunate to serve on the Federal Reserve Board. They have an incredible program. Everybody has very strong opinions about the Federal Reserve, what they did right, what they did wrong. My personal experience is that the Atlanta Bank has been very innovative. They created a program called RAIN, which is the Regional Economic Information Network. During the Great Recession, when basically data was lagging and made it very difficult for them to be able to kind of forecast and make good monetary decisions based on that data and kind of the noise around that, they plugged into Main Street. And so, again, for a retailer, we have kind of a direct line into the behavior of consumers, and we're able to feed that back in to the board, which they listened, and then used that to make some of their decisions. Never thought they cut fast enough, never thought they raised fast enough. Well, this last one they did raise fast enough, but bottom line is they utilize that information. So when I would go to Atlanta, be able to hear from one of the board of governors, who was a voting member on the board of governors at that time, Kristen would be able to join me. She was part of a roundtable recently, being able to kind of give input into that discussion, as well as other meetings that we've been able to use that information to try and elevate, frankly, the major projects, both local, regional, and statewide. And although I'm not, it sounds like you were here, your family was here since 1850 in Florida, 1880 for ours, so about 140 years is pretty good. But bottom line is, our family's going to be in Florida for generations in the future. And so I have a vested interest in making sure that a lot of good things happen, policy-wise, for Florida, which is now, I'm such a big advocate for the Florida Chamber and fortunate to be a member of their board. But we've been kind of fortunate thus far. We have about $4 million per hour in net wealth in migration coming to Florida, $4 billion a year for Collier County. That won't necessarily be the case if we are not smart about some of the policies that we advocate for, and I'm fortunate to be able to have Kristen at my side helping advocate for those.
And so one last way in which we overlap is that simply because I've been working on this project for 20 years, and we had to raise annual money every year, of course, as we grew, but now the $72 million capital campaign that's been going since 2016 has allowed me to broaden, of course, my circle of philanthropists in this town. Michael's family, as it has grown and become more prosperous, has started to really dip into philanthropy more and more. So it's been great for me to be able to introduce Michael to other philanthropists and have him benefit from their train of thought, their best practices, their backgrounds. And so it's just it's a relationship that just keeps growing. And so we have to ask for some questions right now. So thank you for all of your attention. Do you have any questions?
That point on philanthropy and how you intermix with others and learn from that, that's actually something that we do. We should talk about that. Any questions on the founding of the Lincoln Center of Naples? It really does look beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, congratulations. That's just tremendous.
Brian?
I have to believe you're inspiring others to more culture, right?
I hope so.
Right? I mean, it's nice to be independent, to be the only major, gorgeous place, amazing stories. Wow, that chills me in my spine. For the love that I see between the two of you, see it, feel it. So I just drove down here from Sarasota. I can't begin to tell you. I was at Van Wezel last night. There's 15,000 people at that place, but they can't support it. They need $17 million. They've got a Jewish theater, they've got a black theater, they've got an enormous amount of culture. What is it that has to change in a broader scope here that all of a sudden you're the spark that creates more culture? Because there's so much in Sarasota that it should be here too.
Yeah, so when I moved here, one of the things I had to do for the government was to create a board. And like I said at the beginning, I knew nobody. So my realtor became my first board member because he was the only guy I knew. And he worked for John Irwood Realtors, and so he brought me to his boss, Phil Wood. You might have John Irwood in Sarasota too, I think, I'm not sure.
I live in Manhattan.
Oh, you live in Manhattan, so anyway. Phil Wood said to me, Kristen, he heard my story. I walked into him with a binder and 2 pieces of paper, and he said, but he heard the story. He said, Kristen, here's a check for $5,000. People are going to Sarasota and they're coming to Naples, and a lot of them are choosing Sarasota not because it's more beautiful and not because it's cheaper, but because of the arts. So keep going. I do think, and Jay, you have no experience with this, the closed-mindedness of the city council. I do think that it does have to do with the city council, because the mandate for Naples is clean as Disney. The mandate for Sarasota is how many arts, right? He started with the Ringlings, right? They were so impactful in creating this feeling of creativity and out-of-the-boxedness. Naples is younger because we're underneath the frost line. People couldn't really populate Naples until air conditioning came into vogue. Like people came down for 2 weeks at a time, but they didn't, not everybody. Some people lived here all the time, but not a lot of people flooded to Naples, and the way they flooded to Sarasota sooner. So I think we're about 50 years behind Sarasota, to be honest. But maybe I felt that 20 years ago when I started all this, so maybe we're only 30 years behind Sarasota now. And so hopefully, yes, Gulf Shore Playhouse can be the spark that continues, because I know that we have our Van Weasel, it's called Artists. And I know that so many people told me they moved to Naples because of Artists, but then that's all there was in terms of professional offerings. And so I do hope it is the spark that creates the fire.
I actually live in Sarasota, but you've done a great job from the retail perspective, because I think you guys are way more advanced from a retail perspective than we are in our perspective. So I guess it was that was fast.
So hopefully the arts will catch up soon. I think really the key to a lot of this is just education. So the fact that Kristen has been kind of speaking it to kind of an echo chamber for a while, not really getting people to really understand the impact that it could make, the vision that she had. Now once they see it, they start to kind of realize what that is. I think we have groups here to educate leaders both at the local and state level. We're making arts more and more part of that education process. As you have more informed leaders, as you then prepare them to run for office, then things start to really change. And even just educating the broader public about how this enhances their lives, their quality of life. I think then that philanthropy flows, and you then elevate and make this elevate arts and increase the quality of life here.
Michael's going to be here, staying for the next panel on family office and operators. I wish we had much more time for questions, but thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Come join our 361 firm community of investors and thought leaders. We have a lot of events created by the community as we collaborate on investments and philanthropic interests. Join us.